Hey everyone, Final Cut Pro Radio TV Live. Look who we have today. You haven't seen this guy forever. Patrick Southern, Jeff Orthwine,
hey,
and Brad Olson.
And we'll note that Patrick is less of a beard than he was probably last time he was on the radio.
You're right. I didn't even notice that.
It's a beard-heavy show.
It's the younger Patrick.
Yeah, that's younger Patrick has shown up. Older Patrick receded into other hairlines.
Did you find some of the COVID in there? Is that what happened? You cut it off?
It was more along the lines of I'd been going to the barber every 3 weeks to have it shaped, and since that wasn't available, and I did find out that a beard can contain the virus for longer periods of time, I went ahead and started maintaining it a shorter length, and it's that's what's going on. It's like giving yourself a quarantine haircut. This is my quarantine beard trim.
So, since you haven't been on for a while, Patrick, how are you doing out there in California land?
Oh man, doing well. For those of you who aren't in California, we can't do basically anything. But hey, my wife and I were able to get tested even though we didn't have symptoms last Friday. So that was nice. We both came back negative.
Excellent.
So that's good news. So yeah, I mean, just a lot of time in my apartment and teleconferencing with everybody at Frame.io as we're working on the things that we're working on. So. And I'm currently this had been a guest bedroom, and currently it's a mess with a bunch of various things. You'll see I've got a C-stand over here and an XLR cable hanging off said C-stand. I'm building out this room into a studio because when I was at LumaFusion, I did a series called Edit Bay A, and I'm tired of not doing workflow-related videos. I miss monologuing for 30 minutes straight and then cutting that monologue down into 7 minutes. And so also picked up something that was a staple when I was at LumaFusion, the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro, but this is now Generation 2 with a new sensor. And I also added the SSD recorder to the back so that we can record long record times on cheaper media. And the Michael Cioni requirement is that we have gold plate mounts for our batteries as opposed to V-lock in case we decide to undersling our cameras on a Steadicam lest the V-lock batteries slip out. So for any time the camera is upside down, the batteries won't slip out. Now, my concern is if we start shooting, stuff for vertical video, then the battery could slip out again. So, I mean, we'll just have
Well, it should. It should slip out if you shoot vertical video with a camera like that. What is that, 8K vertical video? That's all we need.
Yeah, just 8K vertical. Have you guys watched Quibi since it came out?
No.
Heard of it.
Yeah.
I guess Quibi's not doing so hot if you guys have never watched any of it.
No, it had a bright hot launch, and then apparently a pretty impressive cliff.
I guess
after
so.
the launch.
Yeah, well, they gave away 90 days.
What have you seen?
Well, my favorite thing is a thing called Memory Hole with Will Arnett. It's a show where they basically talk about pop culture things that happened back in like the 80s and 90s that you might have forgotten. Like the Super Bowl shuffle and things like that. So that's fun. And Will Arnett is fun. But,
sure.
I think the thing that, in Chrissy's court, watching Chrissy Teigen preside over small claims courts hearings is pretty funny. But the entire idea of you can switch between vertical and horizontal and it's all on the iPhone could not have come at a worse time, I don't think.
Right. So we got a couple of comments. We got hello from Spencer from Philadelphia, and Christopher Ashworth says rotating a red is wrong. Plain and simple, wrong.
Good thing it's a Blackmagic, not a red.
Yeah, technically
right?
that's Blackmagic. So
that's true. That's
Patrick
true.
gets a pass.
That's true. I'm sorry.
Well,
You're right. I forgot.
We had mentioned 8K, so I think that's where he got that from because there's not a Blackmagic camera that does 8K. But I mean, I personally, having watched some of the stuff on Quibi, if they're going to be doing stuff in Quibi, I think the problem that I've seen with all of their content is that they're still shooting and mastering first for the horizontal, and then the vertical video is a secondary. It's an afterthought. And my thought is, if you're creating an app that's specifically supposed to be designed for the iPhone, and you're making it a big deal that you're creating a vertical view so that people can hold their phone naturally in their hand without, doing all the weird crampy things, then why aren't you shooting for the vertical first?
Well, that was my question: is are they shooting, framing for vertical? Presumably, I mean, they got to be. I mean, that's the whole precept of the channel, right? So
yeah,
there's got to be safe markers on every camera op for the vertical frame.
But it's safe markers, which means that the vertical is always a crop of the wider shot. So if you want to see the entire shot, you're
well, and I mean I guess the counter argument here is that for decades, it continues today. We're still pan and scanning widescreen films. There's a lot of anamorphic widescreen films that we're watching. Cropped to 16:9. Obviously, before it was way cropped to 4:3. Right. And speaking of TCM, as we were earlier, they have a great little interstitial on the pan and scan, which is very informative for like 3 minutes if you're ever sitting around watching a lot of TCM, which I don't know who would. I mean, maybe me. But anyway,
look, Ben Mankiewicz, man, he's the man.
Mankiewicz is kind of my hero. He's all right. Whatever. I don't want to go down that hole. But yes,
right.
Ben Mankiewicz is awesome. I mean, I was a big fan of Robert Osborne. I still am. Sadly, he passed on. But I'm glad Ben Mankiewicz and his team there, Eddie Muller and Alicia Malone and Dave Karger, all of them. All right, sorry. I'm really going down a fanboy track here. The point is, they've got some very informative pieces beyond just the movies, and their piece on pan and scanning is just great. But it also kind of is evidence that, most people don't care about all that stuff. So we're just going to...
Yeah, you can't do that with 9:16 so much. I don't think you can take an anamorphic movie and just pan and scan it to 9:16 and it look right. I've tried doing that with 16:9 material that wasn't shot with. I've even done that with 4:3 material that wasn't shot with 9:16 in mind, and it just does not look right. Side note: I used to edit a side series with Ben Mankiewicz in Final Cut Pro 10. Where we were basically Ben was interviewing like these millionaires and billionaires about their lives, and we were turning them into like documentaries for them to give to their kids and stuff. So I spent a good amount of time.
That sounds like what was that? Was the old speaking of memory hole, the 80s show with Robin Leach?
This Is Your Life? Or
No. Oh, what was it?
Oh, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous?
Lifestyles.
Yes.
It sounds like a modern
that
version of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous with Ben Mankiewicz, which I'm both a little repulsed by, but also totally into. So maybe sometime offline, I'm going to have to really kind of interrogate you about that.
Yeah, that was where we found how difficult it is to ingest C300 footage into Final Cut Pro, because it takes hours and hours of rewrapping of files.
The MXFs?
Yeah, at the time it did, at least. The way that we were doing it, because they were a lot of spanned clips, and to prevent the spanning, we had to use the import method. Because I know there's an import method you can use without using their
the Canon import.
Yeah, the Canon import tool.
Yeah,
but because we were doing the Canon import tool, it took like literally just importing took 4 to 8 hours.
Yikes.
Wow.
I mean, so we shot both on a C300.
It was like 3 hours of footage, right? It was like 3 hour long clips shot on C300s. So
they were long takes for sure, but still, I mean that's still bonkers ingest time.
Patrick, what did you rewrap with? What did you use?
I mean, the rewrapping just happened naturally inside of Final Cut, right?
Okay.
When it was doing the import process using the Canon camera plugin.
Was it optimizing?
No, that was just importing the files. Just importing the files in their native codec and rewrapping it to MOV.
Well, it's gotten better since then.
Well, that's good to know. How was it on Bokeh? I mean, I guess you guys were probably doing much shorter takes than 3 hours.
Well, didn't
a take.
Did you record with an external recorder on that?
We did both.
ProRes?
Yeah, we were doing internal MXF recordings, and then everything was also being recorded through. We had a Atomos Blade and a Pix 240, both capturing ProRes. So yeah, we had two captures of everything, and by and large, we were cutting with the ProRes and dealing with the ProRes.
Yeah.
So most of the MXF issues. I didn't have to spend a lot of time on, but
do those issues still exist with Final Cut?
I don't know. I've been doing red and Blackmagic cameras for the most part for the last 3 years. That was like 5 years ago, so I don't know.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, off the tracks, I rented a C300 Mark II, and I didn't have ingest problems. I can't remember the format it recorded in. I don't know if at that point you had the option to do MOVs, but wasn't a big problem for me.
Or me.
Do you have a C300?
No, I have the footage.
Right. You have the footage, right?
For off the tracks. Yeah.
Off the tracks.
Right.
So.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. That was 2016. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That was That was 3.5 years ago.
We met at the Creative Summit, Brad, physically in person, but you were on the show, Final Cut Pro Radio, before that when we talked about, editing. So that was 2016? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2016 is when I met Brad for the first time, too, at the Summit, and that's when Phil Schiller was talking about how the laptops were getting thinner. And finally, I guess we got a little bit bigger with the MacBook Pro as of late, right?
And the Mac Pro and the iPhone Pro. Absolutely.
Yeah. So instead of trying to shrink everything down to the smallest possible size, they're finally like, well, yeah, but we also lose performance if we keep doing it.
Exactly.
Am I allowed to say your joke, or are you going to get in trouble? We're watching the presentation.
Oh, boy.
And Patrick, when Phil Schiller says the laptops are now, or MacBook Pro is now 17% thinner, Patrick was like, why don't you get 17% thinner, Phil?
Oh, my goodness.
And then he's like, oh, I feel bad about that.
Hey, you're going to get blocked on Twitter for that, Patrick, that comment. So speaking of the Mac Pro, Emil says, next topic should be Mac Pro wheels. Now, I would not classify myself as a Mac fanboy, okay? I use the Mac, and I really, really like it. And usually I would say that you pay a premium. It's a premium product. But $700
it was the wheels that turned you into a fanboy?
Exactly. $700 for those four wheels is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they were $400. I didn't get them, but they were $400 when I bought the Mac, right?
The upgrade, yeah. So it's buying them separately costs more, apparently.
I would love to see someone go to the hardware store. I would love to see someone go to the hardware store and get their own pneumatic wheels and, just get like those smart wheels that you put on the bottom of like, a push cart and just put those on the bottom. Just have these giant pneumatic wheels underneath the Mac
guarantee Pro. It's not an exact millimeter or imperial measurement. Apple just has some bizarre... so nothing quite fits right in there.
Look, man, you just use some duct tape and some plywood.
Yeah.
Here's my $40,000 computer on. $20 wheels from Home Depot.
Well, you saw the one video. The wheels don't even have a lock, right?
Do they
so
not?
They roll.
Oh, that's not great.
No, they don't even have a lock. So somebody, one of the guys that did a review of it, showed it. He had a tilted floor, and it would just roll right over this way. So I have the feet because I have mine right up here on my desk, and the last thing I want is the thing to roll off.
No, you got to get those. You got to get the Apple-sized wheel blocks. Put them on either side so that it doesn't roll. Just kind of like you do with your truck when you're working on it.
So David Tillman said some great beards on this episode. I guess we all have beards.
We're all trapped inside.
Yeah,
well, that's true.
Of course, we've got beards.
We don't have David Tillman's beard. He's true. A great beard.
David was on the show. I had him on a couple months ago, talking about his latest project that he edited. So, Jeffrey, you're in a soundproof or sound-treated room?
Well, In part, yeah.
Just the part
Behind
we're
me
looking
sound
at.
treated.
Yeah,
In
well,
front
I'm
of me is a
saying.
hallway.
Oh, okay. So is that for streaming live and conferences
Yeah,
and
I
stuff?
mean it's my all-purpose office. So yeah, I put some sound panels up because the reflective surfaces. But it's also doesn't even have a door. So I'm kind of polishing brass on the Titanic.
Well, it sounds
but
good. It sounds good sonically.
Well, but yeah, hopefully the mic is doing some of the work for me. So,
What kind of lighting are you using there, Jeff?
I've got a Duracast bolt ray up above in front of me. I've got a little LED panel behind me, and then I've just got my kind of office lights kind of around that are daylight balanced.
So Christopher Ashworth says, what brand sound panels? Are they generics or something special? RLX or?
Oh, no, they're not special. They are the foamy bits that you buy on the internet.
On Amazon has a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, I got a lot of it on Amazon. No, it's just the standard thing. And it's a problematic setup. They're just straight up foam. So they're limited in their effectiveness. But
so we got another comment. New topic: use of Atomos recorders for ProRes HQ or RAW acquisition. More mainstream across your panel. Ask across your panel. So that one camera, what camera was that? The $12,000 camera that now can record to that records internally ProRes RAW, right?
Wait, which camera is this?
There's a new camera that just came out that records internally ProRes RAW.
Is there?
Yes. Not the DJI drone camera. There's
another
another
camera
camera.
or something.
Well, who makes the
Right.
camera?
I have to look it up. I thought you guys would know this.
Z-Cam or Confinity or one of those.
Yeah, it's some kind of an odd, it must be a foreign one, I'm not sure.
Wow, you look that
I
up.
feel like I heard about that, but I never got the details.
Yeah.
I recently picked up a
here it
Sumo 19 for $1,000 on Lens Authority.
Really? Used?
Yeah, but in excellent condition.
That's
Eugene
fantastic.
Laren says Kinfinity Edge.
Oh, the
Kinfinity
Confinity Edge?
Kinfinity Edge, okay. Yeah, it
Oh,
records
interesting.
internally. ProRes RAW internally. So what does that say about the Red Raw discussion the patent we were talking about at some point, whether that was restricting camera
They're
use?
that's a
they're
good
not in
question.
the U.S., so they're dodging the Reds. I don't know. Atomos is Australian. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have no idea either.
They might have to pay some sort of fee for every unit sold.
But I think it's
typically.
12. I think I looked it up. I think it was 12 grand for the body, something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Something.
the Confinity is supposed to kind of be like a competitor, like a low-end competitor to the Red cameras, I feel like. Maybe not low-end, but low cost.
Right.
Yeah,
If that's their selling point, though, I mean, I'm not sure that I would get a camera just because it's getting ProRes RAW. When if it's 12 grand, I mean, for substantially less money,
Sure.
you've got an outboard recorder grabbing it.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
that's their selling point. It's been kind of a popular camera in like the indie film space. From what I've heard, I've seen a number of like CVP has brought up those cameras before.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm more interested in Nikon's camera that recently announced. Well, I mean, I guess not announced, but recently actually came out with ProRes RAW support. 'Cause I think that
Internally, or the one that works with.
it works with a recorder, but I think it's capable of pretty high resolution, if I'm not mistaken.
So to clarify on these cameras that output RAW, it's not that the camera itself has to support ProRes RAW, it's just that it needs a RAW output. Is that right?
That's correct.
Because then you could take a Blackmagic recorder and record in Blackmagic RAW with any of these cameras as well.
Well,
The
that's one of the-
technology is there for them to be able to do that. Whether they have worked together to market that and make sure that any loose ends are tied up, that's a question. Because in your SDI feed, there's all sorts of metadata that's like kept in the SDI feed, and you have to coordinate knowing what lines of code to exposed to what fields to be able to get all of that information correctly. So to be able to get things like ISO and shutter speed and all the other things that people expect from a metadata standpoint for RAW, you really do need those two companies to coordinate together.
Okay. That's good to know. So we got a Peter Mann says hi from Cape Town, South Africa, I guess.
All right.
Hey.
Hello,
Hi.
South Africa.
So that's interesting. There's a lot of cameras that'll record to the recorder, but the internal ones I'm always curious about, because I've heard discussions about there's a Red Raw patent preventing that, but then the DJI drone camera can, and this is the first camera I've heard besides the DJI drone that can record ProRes RAW internally for whatever the reason. Yeah. I'm not sure what the reason is. So Patrick, you got a Mac Pro, correct? Or did the company
the Frame.io got a Mac Pro. It's currently at the office in Hollywood, and Michael Cioni's currently got the Pro Display XDR that goes with it connected to one of his computers. So I could, if I wanted to, bring the Mac Pro here, but I have no way of monitoring what's on it.
It won't just hook up to a normal random monitor? Or?
Yeah.
You assume that I have a normal random monitor.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, I'm on an LG, a 34-inch LG ultra wide. I had to hook up via USB, but it's weird the way this Mac Pro starts up, which monitor it chooses to start up with. I have two monitors, one vertical over here, and then the LG 34 here. The LG is supposed to be the main monitor, but sometimes it starts on the side monitor, and I got to go sideways. I don't know why. I don't know how it picks it. Most of the time it'll be the LG, but every once in a while the side monitor will be the startup, and I don't really change anything. So I'm not sure how the Mac Pro decides which monitor it's going to use.
I wonder if it's that weird thing where the application switcher also changes monitors. Have you noticed that?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. Well, I learned recently that it follows the dock. So if you've interacted with the dock, whichever display the dock was last used on is when the applications. That's what where the application switcher.
I'll check that. I don't think that's the case for me. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's the only thing I can think of that, at least initially, where the computer is saying this is the active primary display versus that's the active primary display. So when you shut down, just make sure the wide one is the active primary display. And
that's a good point, Jeff. Because I've been trying. We have a Mac Pro Facebook group, Mac Pro 2019, and I asked right when I got it. I said, "This is weird. I can't tell which monitor is going to be used." So what I would initially was doing was unplugging the HDMI cable for the second monitor, so it would force it to go to the first monitor. But
that sounds like a software bug more than or software idiosyncrasy more than a hardware one. But
right. It's very, very strange. So we got a comment. So Bill says, anything that you guys think could be a good replacement for the XDR? I think he means for cost purposes, not just quality.
Oh, is this as an HDR monitor, or is this just as your primary display?
What's the use case for it?
Yeah, probably something that's compatible, maybe little less money. I'm presuming he means less money, maybe not.
Well, see, that's where I've been thinking about that for a long time, because I had the money saved up for Pro Display XDR, but this coronavirus thing made me rethink how much money I want to spend on stuff. Mm-hmm. And when it popped up on Lens Authority, that's the, so I don't know if you guys gone to lensrentals.com, but their used sales side of that is Lens Authority. And a couple of these Sumo 19s popped up, and I just snagged it. It was $1,000, so it's more than half off. And it's not giving you everything that a Pro Display XDR is. First of all, it's an 8-bit monitor with that kind of 2-bit dithering, so like kind of fakes 10-bit. It
really?
does.
Is it faking 10-bit?
It's faking 10-bit. If you look, it'll say 10-bit, and then it'll say 8 plus 2 FCR or something like that. Which just
in the manual, it actually says 8.5-bit.
Yeah. So, but it's still.
Joking.
I mean, there you go.
It's a gag.
I figured
you
read
reference.
the manual. The other thing is it does up to 1200 nits. It's only HD in resolution, but it can accept 4K inputs. And then the other thing you have to do is you need to get the I haven't purchased this yet. Right now, I'm just using. I got it right here. Right now, just for SDR stuff, I'm using one of these guys.
Right.
For output. But if you want HDR, then there's for $9.95, the Blackmagic makes a little box that will pipe out the HDR data.
Yeah. Or you could also use the Hi-Fi from AJA, or you could use the AJA IO 4K or 4K Plus.
Right.
Those also work for that purpose. I actually I worked on a ProRes RAW shoot where we were capturing specifically to test out. It's specifically to test out the HDR capabilities of ProRes RAW, and we ended up using the Sumo 19 as well. And I don't know. I mean, personally, Brad, I think that it's not 10-bit, but it doesn't have the ghosting that you have with the Pro Display XDR, right? The Pro Display XDR, if you've got a really bright area, there's like some blooming that happens around those brighter areas that I've seen, especially like just the Mac launch logo. It shows up white, and then there's like this glow around it for like 2 inches around it. Yeah.
Because is that because the backlighting zones that are
the backlighting zones. Yeah, it's a very low resolution LED backlight solution, whereas the Sumo, something like that, and the Pro Display so the Pro Display XDR has that issue, but the Sumo 19 seems to be pretty accurate to just the areas where I mean, I kind of think it's a better looking monitor, but don't tell anyone I said that.
Well, you're making me feel really good, Patrick. So about saving $5,000 and. Because I had to get the stand. If I got
if you're talking about just HDR monitoring, I think it's a better monitor. But
how much are the wheels for the Sumo?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what's funny about that?
$7,000.
When they shipped it to me, they actually forgot to include the screws to attach the feet, so they had to send those separately. But there's just little feet. But I've actually
got it was half off, Brad. It was half off because they forgot the screws.
I actually had a monitor stand already, like a big one that I was able to just attach the Visa mount stuff on the back.
What did you guys think about Tim Cook mentioning Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro in the Apple's earning call?
Made me feel warm and fuzzy.
I was shocked. I mean, I listened to the earning calls a lot of the times, and I was shocked that he mentioned it. I was thankful that Tim Cook knew what they were. I wasn't sure if he knew about Final Cut Pro and Logic, especially Logic. I mean, I was just glad he knew what they were, so that was really, really
sure
cool.
he knows. I'm sure he knows what they are. I mean, I think that there's a real possibility here, a likelihood that we're in the middle of a massive cultural transition, and nobody knows exactly what it looks like on the other side of that. But because we're all currently trapped inside, as we were talking about. Virtual production, remote production, independent production is absolutely exploding. And whether it's the iPads that they're shipping or whatever, independent execution of things is the name of the game right now. I won't speak as much to Logic, but Final Cut obviously excels at an individual user. So there's a real opportunity for Apple, just as a business case, to start eating into other parts of the market that they don't already own. I mean, Final Cut owns huge markets already, but the people who are still dependent on team workflows, who are hurting right now.
Right.
This is a strike point for Apple to say, like, hey, you know what, you can do this. You can still work as a team, you can still trade stuff off, but you can get a lot farther down the field using that ecosystem. So was it a casual mention? Maybe. Was it a strategic, hey, we've also got 90-day free trials and a student package where you get Final Cut Pro and Compressor and Motion and Logic for $200. That's 4 months of rental for some other ecosystems.
Exactly.
And there's a likelihood that we're going to be indoors for 4 months. So, do the math.
Strategic. So one of the things that they mentioned on the call, 100,000 iPads were sold to LA, and 350,000 iPads were sold to New York. These are the educational systems.
Right.
100,000 to LA and 350,000 to New York. That's a lot of licenses of LumaFusion.
That's huge for LumaFusion. It's huge for anyone in the iOS ecosystem, and iOS is the gateway drug for the larger macOS platform.
Speaking of LumaFusion, I have to give away a license of LumaFusion today. So anybody that wants to get a copy, none of you guys, okay? I'm not going to give it to any one of you guys.
Is that in our swag bag?
That's not in your swag bag. I'm going to, if anybody wants to win the copy of LumaFusion, just make a comment in the comments and say something clever, funny, surprising, or just say you want to. Christopher says me. That's pretty funny. Please. So far, you're the top one, Christopher. So what did Brad go? He went to get something, or?
I think he's trying to figure out how he can enter into this. He's
going to enter
log
another
into another
name.
machine
Another
so he can
name.
make a comment.
Yeah, he's got his kid signing up, to be part of the raffle. I think.
Yeah.
I was talking to Brad one time on one of these Phonica Pro Radio Lives, and he got lunch delivered to him in the background.
Oh, I remember this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it a Jimmy John's? Was that right? It was a Jimmy John's sandwich.
Was. He's not listening. He's
Fred's
preoccupied.
He is preoccupied.
He looks like some mad scientist.
Yeah, well, you saw it. Was that a phone? He's totally making comments. Look at the comment stream. Brad just entered 3 times.
I can see that.
Yeah. Brad trying to get his LumaFusion license.
You guys are
yeah.
me. I had a 4-year-old into the room. Also, I was trying to figure out the best way to share my setup, and I unfortunately think my other wider lens for the Blackmagic Pocket is downstairs. So I decided to take pictures with my phone and then plug in my screen. And give me a minute, I'll circle back. Keep doing the LumaFusion giveaway.
Here's a comment that's probably pretty funny. I thought this was a live performance by an 80s band, then I turned on the volume. I guess he means us.
Do we all look like we're from the 80s?
Well, 80s band, I don't know. Okay. That's funny.
It must be all the beards.
Cheers from Singapore. Nuno says that's the comment he gave.
Hey, cheers.
Bill says, "I'll do your laundry." This was for the LumaFusion license.
Which bill is this?
Bill Tsola, Tsola.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure who that is. He says, "I'll do your laundry." That's pretty good. That's a pretty good deal.
Thanks, Bill. That's very kind.
I might have to get some more licenses.
It's a perfect offer, knowing that we can't have them into our house.
Yeah.
Right.
So he can't actually deliver.
Nuno says about the 80s band, he goes, "Yes, you guys with the same beard type, it was a compliment." Nuno Boggis? Boggiss?
All right, we got the beard, so we need matching outfits.
Yeah, and we got to have the same taste in music, at least for the band. Brad, don't put up your serial number or anything on the screen. Because we got his screen there. That's pretty.
I think that's one of the still images he shot, eh?
Yeah. I'm just trying to.
Oh no, that's live.
It's hard on the secondary monitor here. I thought that F would full screen things, but apparently it goes to filters. How do I full screen?
So Nick Ring says. Nick Ring says, "I mean, of course, I like it, but Bill's offer of household chores impressive for LumaFusion. That's pretty. I didn't realize I was going to get an offer for household chores. I've had LumaFusion on this show like 3 times, 4 times. Terry and Chris. Yeah, it's a great product. Started quite a while ago.
So, Brad, you just got this thing yesterday? Is that right?
Yeah. So just yesterday it came in the mail. So I'm still kind of working out everything, but. This is the A10 Mini Pro. This is what I'm looking at on my desk. Nice. I can obviously switch between me and my computer screen, which is really cool. Or I can switch between other cameras.
Show us another camera, man.
Well, the lens is really, really. It's on a 50, And so it's like just really hard for me to get any decent looking shot. And I have another lens, but I thought it was in here in my room, but it's not. So
have to be a decent looking shot. We just want to see the functionality.
Well, the other problem is I don't have enough HDMI cables. So
I'm hearing a lot of excuses.
It is a lot of excuses. But I currently have 2 HDMI cables going in. One is going out to that Sumo. And that's the little monitor stand thing that I had lying around. It was initially meant for like 3 monitors, but
it's acting as your multi-view. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I got it. I can actually switch between multi-view and program mode. And hey, there's you guys.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's my old cinema camera. And then I've got a little Shinobi sitting in front of that. That's my reference.
Oh,
since it doesn't have like a flip back screen. So anyway, I had a couple. Sorry, I derailed the LumaFusion. Oh, look, there's some.
That's okay. That's okay.
I derailed the LumaFusion conversation.
That's okay.
Which is really cool, and I want to get an iPad Pro just for LumaFusion. So there's my plug
I'm the
for that.
same way. I don't want an iPad Pro, but I will get one just with a pencil and that trackpad, just for LumaFusion, because as a secondary NLE.
What you're saying, you're not going to get it just so you can do use the Apple Pencil to do your annotations in Frame.io? That's not reason enough?
Tell me about that. Oh, you mean like squiggly lines and stuff and arrows and all that
stuff?
stuff?
Squiggly lines, arrows,
cool.
Yeah. So whenever you're doing a color grade and you want to be like, hey, do a vignette around this piece here, you can draw a little circle and, write the person's name and, do all that sort of thing with the Apple Pencil.
I've been doing that with my mouse for years, and
yeah,
I'm sure you have.
I have. We were a beta tester of Frame.io for our VFX. Yeah. Right early on. When Frame.io launched, we were in our VFX stages, so we were passing all our visual effects for Bokeh through Frame.io, which was, it was perfectly timed because. I'm here in the Bay Area. Our effects people were in LA and then Chicago and then Canada. So it was perfect timing. We were like, yes, this is exactly what we need at the exact moment. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's a good deal. It's a good timing thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So speaking of the iPad, the rumor that it won't die, Final Cut Pro 10 on the iPad. What do you guys think?
I talked about that for 2 hours last week, so I'm going to shut up and let anybody else have a comment.
Well, I guess the couple of questions. What do you think the appeal of Final Cut Pro on an iPad is versus Final Cut Pro on a 13-inch MacBook or a 16-inch MacBook Pro? What is exactly the appeal between those? Is it touch? I don't think it's touch, is it? And then they made a trackpad for the iPad to make it more like a MacBook Pro.
Have any of you played with Sidecar with Final Cut Pro 10 and the iPad?
Not yet.
I did on the last big Final Cut update. We were doing a video, and so I was like, "Oh, let's test out Sidecar and see how it works." And I was excited about Sidecar because hey, you could put your Frame.io panel in Sidecar, and so you could have Frame.io on your iPad, and then you could have the rest of Final Cut over here. So workflow extensions in the iPad, whatever. But from a practical standpoint, there's not Final Cut is not designed for that sort of interaction, whereas something like LumaFusion is. So, they could port it over to the iPad, and I guess there would be benefit in doing that since now we've got that new stand that kind of makes the iPad Pro almost more like a Microsoft Surface, but Apple. But does an iPad really have the kind of power to perform with Final Cut where they deport it over? That would be a multi-year project to get it optimized for the user experience on iPad anyway. Right.
And not only that, but what about all my plugins? I have 1,000 plugins on Final Cut Pro.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the use case? We forget the competition with LumaFusion. If Apple wants to do something, it doesn't matter who else is doing it; they're going to do it their way.
Right.
And they have. There's iMovie on iOS, and that's not Final Cut 10. I don't suggest that it is, but it's also the interface that's designed for that hardware. And what more would an iOS version of Final Cut 10 be beyond what iMovie for iOS already is? And I mean, I don't know, but I feel like once you start pushing outside of what iMovie on iOS can do and what it wants to do on that interface, then you're moving to a desktop and you're moving to Final Cut 10. So yeah, well, I don't know what the use case is.
I agree with you 100%, Jeff. I'm not saying that it won't get there, but it's going to have to be a compromised version, right?
Yeah, it would have to.
Which is what iMovie is. I mean,
right,
compromise is not the most complimentary term, but it's a reduced version of the Final Cut 10 functionality. So if you want to do edits in the field, you've got iOS. If you want to do more heavier edits in the field, you've got LumaFusion. Beyond that, you've got a laptop, which works really well.
And it's portable.
And it can connect to external speakers. And
it has your plugins. Yeah.
It's got more processing power, which is what you need usually whenever you're working in Final Cut. You need processing power. If there's ever a world in which they're ever going to be able to do a scrolling timeline, it will not happen on the iPad Pro. You need horsepower.
No, that's not true, Patrick, because LumaFusion does a scrolling timeline.
Does it?
On the iPad. Yes, everybody does.
Oh, man. I guess I should have.
Everybody does, except for one.
LumaFusion doesn't do updating like tons of thumbnails, though, right? It's just the one thumbnail at the beginning and then the strip. So that's is Final Cut's always updating those thumbnails, and that's the trick.
It doesn't update during playback, though.
Well, the other thing is just so people would like the option of turning that updating off. I saw that request just this week. Just a little tick box, turn the updating off, and then turn it back on when you need it. You don't need it all the time. It's just like background rendering. I don't use it. I don't want everything rendering. Vertical video, Brad, what are you doing?
Well, it won't let me flip it horizontal. Look at that.
Oh, there you go.
So Patrick was trying to get me to add another camera.
so you added your iPhone.
It's the Quibi version of the live stream. I dig it.
Here's my other camera. It's my backyard bird feeder. You guys can't see it, but everybody else can.
That must be on the stream because it's the rear window camera.
The rear window camera. I'm going to change that thanks to you, Jeffrey. That's a great suggestion.
That's hilarious.
Well, that way, whenever you're looking at the backyard there'll be this subtle background tension of, is somebody getting murdered out there?
Right.
It's good.
Jimmy Stewart and who was the guy? Ironsides. What's his name?
Jeremy Irons?
No, the guy that played Ironsides on TV.
Oh.
Who was the guy across the way?
I want to say Carl Malden, but it wasn't Carl Malden. It was
no, it wasn't Carl.
The other guy.
Yeah, the other guy. Anyway, yeah.
Ben Mankiewicz would know.
Ben Mankiewicz would have me on this. Besides, well, all right, then okay.
So I wonder if people who have bought the iPad Pro and used the trackpad and things, how responsive is the cursor? Is it just as good as Mac OS or not? Or is it a little laggy?
I don't know.
Raymond Burr, that's what it was, yeah. The pencil I don't think is laggy at all. I mean, I don't know about in a video editing application, but I don't have a pencil, but I've played around with them, and every time I've used them, it's pretty responsive.
Yeah. I mean, it potentially could be the application that isn't as responsive. Again, back to Final Cut Pro on the iPad. I had Final Cut Pro running on an iMac Pro and then sidecarring to an iPad, and the amount of lag that was introduced just by that alone was painful.
Well, that's a wireless connection for video. I mean, that
it's going to be slower. Yeah,
I would be surprised if it wasn't.
So speaking of that exact thing, one of the issues with LumaFusion, people that don't like, is the fact that you can't edit media connected to a USB-C hard drive directly. You can go through it, search through it, select in and out, but once you add it to the timeline, it's copied to the iPad internal storage. But from what I understand, our friend from Australia, Chris Hawking, said That's because Apple makes these developers go through the Files app. They can't access the media directly on the hard drive yet.
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, Apple does a lot of sandboxing anytime you are working within either iTunes or the Mac App Store. Anytime you're working with an app store that's Apple related, there's all sorts of sandboxing that happens. So it makes sense that having to go through the Files app structure to be able to access content. Yeah, it makes perfect sense that would be the case.
If a Final Cut Pro came to the iPad Pro, say a year from now, 2 years from now, would you guys use the pencil with Final Cut Pro? Do you think?
Depends on the features and how they design it. So, like I've been saying for a long time, iMovie with the precision editor actually becomes useful. So maybe something like that would be kind of fun. But trimming, slipping and sliding clips, maybe the pencil's a little more precise for some of that. And
it just depends on the interface
really
design. If the interface is designed for a human finger versus a pencil, then I probably wouldn't want to use a pencil. It just depends on the design.
I like the feeling of a pencil in my hand when it comes to like just writing notes. For a while, I had been writing all of the notes for my meetings by hand and then transcribing those notes to digital. And then that process got cumbersome. But I fully enjoy writing and doing things, manipulating things with my hands. So yeah, I don't know. I might.
I mean, the nice thing about fingers is, you got the multi-touch options. You can't really multi-touch with a pencil. So pinching, 3-finger dragging, whatever.
Well, I'll tell you the one interface when I first saw it that I thought, they've got to put a separate iPad app for this, was the color board. And I know a lot of people are mad they didn't have the wheels. But when I saw that interface, I thought with the 4 pucks, that was designed for multi-touch, and that we haven't seen it.
Right.
That's the one tool where it's like, man, that would be really useful. I could adjust with multiple fingers at the same time on that color board, and it would work a lot better.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So this guy named John Prosser predicted the 13-inch MacBook. It's a MacBook or MacBook Pro that came out this week?
I thought it was just a MacBook.
MacBook 13-inch.
John Prosser.
Well, he on Twitter, he's got, like, I checked it. He's the one that started all this stuff by Final Cut Pro and the iPad Pro.
Yeah.
And then he predicted accurately that the date that the 13-inch MacBook was going to be released, and he was right. It was Monday. And then he posted today, I don't think Apple likes me. This is on Twitter. I just got blocked by the senior vice president of marketing. No biggie. Phil must not like Apple leaks. And it has a picture of Phil Schiller, says, Phil Schiller has blocked you. It's on Twitter.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I'm not sure how accurate he is. This was accurate. Another one was accurate, but he's got a big following, so I presume he's accurate. He's the one that said that Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro are absolutely coming to the iPad Pro sometime later this year or next year. This is what he said. He didn't guess. This is what he's saying it is coming. So,
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, once again, I can't imagine running all my audio unit plugins on Logic Pro on the iPad. I can't see, it takes up a lot of processing power.
Yeah, and how are you going to get the audio I/O to? I mean, I guess that's not the point. I guess on an iPad, you're probably going instrument by instrument, and there are devices, I guess, for audio I/O to do like a channel to 2 channels at a time. But how are you going to do drums, man? I mean, virtual drums, I guess.
Well, the interesting thing is the drums have changed over the years. They used to be digital samples. Now they're actually studio audio recordings, multiple microphones. You can bring in and out overhead mics. You can bring these mics out, close mic to the snare. That there's no way most people could afford those microphones, let alone things. So now they're actually studio audio samples that they're using. And you trigger those. Yeah.
I mean, so that works for certain genres of music, but I don't think that works universally. And as a drummer, I'm a little
says the drummer.
yeah. As a drummer, I would very much like to.
You're getting replaced. You're obsolete, Patrick.
No,
Your
a
next
live
job
drummer.
editing is. Oh wait.
A live drummer, absolutely. Can you imagine the Stones without Charlie Watts? No, absolutely not.
I mean, could I imagine the Stones with a virtualized Charlie Watts? And
that was Jagger's solo album that didn't sell. That's what I would say that would be. Keith Richard would not play without Charlie Watts. Guaranteed he would not play without Charlie Watts and the Stones. So
there you go.
I'm curious what you guys are doing for remote kind of workflow things. Obviously, Frame.io, Michael Cioni's put out a lot of videos with him talking about this. What's your current situation, or how are you guys doing work? Yeah, just are. Patrick's can't say anything.
No, I can talk about how I'm doing. I was just trying to let anybody else go first. Yeah, I mean, as you guys know, I'm building out a studio here, but even on Cioni's Workflow from Home video series, we actually have been eating our own dog food and using Frame.io to pass assets back and forth. So like I'll create screen recordings, or we'll have somebody else do graphics, and somebody else is doing the audio mix or whatever. And so there's been a lot of using Frame.io as a repository, and then, pulling all those assets down using, I can't say anything about it, but the new beta that came out today for Frame.io transfer. So we've been using that to pull assets down in batch. And so that's been really useful.
Congrats, by the way, on you guys releasing a new version. If anybody wants to look it up, there's a great video. There's a blog post that's all over Facebook.
Michael Cioni posted this morning, Frame.io introducing Frame.io version 3.6. And the one feature that I saw mentioned, it was actually on Frame.io's Facebook page, was watermark ID. I love that. It's like instantly watermarks for every frame of the. I really like that.
I believe that's for enterprise users, is what I saw.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. So we've been using Frame.io, and then the other thing that I personally like to use for remote collaboration is an application called PostLab for in conjunction with Final Cut. So it's kind of like versioning tool for your libraries, but it also does library locking. It works great in remote situations, but even if you've got a jellyfish and you're working locally to each other, maybe the pandemic has passed and we're working in offices together again. The versioning and the library locking and feedback that it gives around all of that is still extremely useful. So I'm a big fan of PostLab for collaborating in Final Cut, and then we've been using Frame.io for passing files and setting up your own home studio and trying to make it look better than whatever Jimmy Fallon's doing over at his house.
well, the one I saw, the one picture that it was the guy. What's the guy with orange hair? What's his name?
Conan O'Brien.
Conan O'Brien. He was talking about doing things from home, and he had a horrible haircut. And I said, "Looks like you got your hair cut from home too, or you got your hairdresser from home." It's like disheveled.
I think
whatever.
There's actually a really cool Frame.io behind the scenes of that, and I think a lot of the way Conan's doing it is deliberate in terms of style.
Sure. Right. I understand.
I was going to say, the interesting thing about this pandemic situation is that I've had directors, producers I've worked with, and clients I've worked with for years who've never fully grasped Frame.io for whatever reason. I'll put something up on there, I'll invite them to link, I'll tell them to comment on there, and they still send me texts, phone calls, emails. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Can you put it on Frame.io? And finally with this, they're like, hey, I get it now. Oh, this is awesome. And it was interesting. Years ago, there were people that weren't even in video, just somebody in my church that I was doing a video. We were doing a youth video or whatever. And he got it right away. And he was never in the video business. But all these people in filmmaking and whatever just wanted to stick with their old habits and do it the way they are used to.
Yeah,
and so
that's the same burden of legacy mindset that happens all over.
Yeah, which is always a challenge as a developer, because you've got to find a way to get those features and functionality adopted by demographics who don't understand it, because I feel like when you're younger and have been doing things for a shorter period of time, maybe you're more flexible or something. I'm not sure. I mean,
sure.
Well, this guy I was working with wasn't older. He just was new to video, and so he's like, "Oh, this is how I do it." He's like, "This is awesome." And
yeah. No, what I'm saying is, like, it is harder. Like I've worked with multiple clients, and that where it's hard to pick up new technology, but then you work with like an 18-year-old, and you're like, "Oh God, what is the?" They're laughing at me. Like twice now I've worked at a company where there's like an 18 or 20-year-old who comes in and is like, and this is how you do the AI machine learning. And I'm like, how do you...
Right, exactly.
So like it happens with me as well. I feel like just because of how brain development happens, the sorts of problems that we're trying to solve at different ages changes. And so, you've got somebody in their 20s that approaches the problems completely differently than I do at 33.
Sure.
So you have to design your software for the spectrum of users, right? So it's people who are going to be able to figure it out no matter how difficult or unintuitive it is. And then you have to find ways of making metaphors for people who have been spending 30 years of their career working with the thing. Like, if I'm completely honest, if something like Final Cut Pro 10 came out today and completely revolutionized how everything worked, I would be much slower to adopt it than I was at, I guess I was like 2022, something like that when it originally came out.
It was 9 years ago.
Was it 9 years ago?
Yeah.
So I was 24, I guess. I was 24 at the time.
Yeah, I get it.
I'd be very slow to adopt something as wholeheartedly as I have with Final Cut now. That I'm not that now. There are others who are much better at that, who were in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, and like, hey, they're just on that train. But not everybody has that mindset. So.
Rusty Earl says transfer works great. Thank you for your part in this, Patrick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That thing is amazing. Like, yeah. You guys.
I'm looking forward to playing around with it. Well, I was showing off the Blackmagic ATEM Mini Pro, and one of the things I was trying to figure out early on was I was trying to meet with the director. We couldn't meet in person anymore, and yes, I was putting cuts up on Frame.io, but we wanted to be able to review the footage together. And over an app like Zoom with screen sharing, that is a really horrible experience. Yeah. So I was testing yesterday. I can take this guy and attach my computer in through the HDMI to the ATEM and get AV out and have that just as a webcam that I can switch to. I can even do picture-in-picture. But here's the rub. Final Cut, as far as I can tell, doesn't have a way to separate the audio out from Final Cut from the system settings. And where this becomes a problem is if he's chatting with me over on the same computer I'm trying to play back from, then he would hear himself, the director would hear himself over the thing. Now, Resolve, on the other hand, is kind of clever. It will look at this device and it'll send a clean audio feed from the editing app, and I also still have the system audio as well, and I can hear the playback, so sending it out both ways. So I could, on my headphones, hear somebody talking to me and be listening to the video, and they're just getting over my little ATEM. They would be getting my microphone and just a clean audio feed from Resolve. So I figured out in Resolve I can do it, and in Final Cut I cannot. GarageBand will allow me to separate the audio from the system settings. So, yeah.
Have you guys?
You got a little tool here that we're showing off?
Have you played with the MIDI
From-
settings in macOS?
I haven't gone that deep.
Yeah, I mean, you can create unique audio. Sorry, this is probably where you were going, Patrick.
No, go for it.
No, I mean, well, I've only played around with it a few times, but you can create essentially separate audio outputs, including multiple sources. I don't know if you could set up a full mix minus in there. I mean, Brad, what you're talking about is you basically need an audio mixer in your chain at this point. But you might be able to fake it with the MIDI.
Yeah, but how do I, if I have an audio mixer, I mean, because I'm still wondering how in Final Cut I would separate that from the system settings, because there's not like an audio output in Final Cut.
Oh, but
I don't think you can separate it in Final Cut, but you can separate it in Zoom.
It's in 10.5, Brad. It's coming in 10.5.
Oh, okay.
They have a roles-based mixer that's coming, so they'll have all that taken care of for you.
I figured there was a software solution like outside of Final Cut for sending those buses. It was just kind of frustrating that there wasn't a way to separate it, or really what all Resolve is doing is saying, hey, this is an AV device. I'll send audio and video over this specifically, and then the system settings are separate, which would be nice if Final Cut saw it like that.
That's what Final Cut's doing as well, right?
But it's only video. It's no audio.
Oh, I thought it was an AV out. It's just a.
It does say AV out. I've
never used
it
the
with
audio.
the Sumo. I've tested it with this, and Final Cut doesn't send the audio over this. I don't know. I'm gonna have to do some more testing and figure out.
I mean, I've been able to send audio over HDMI using Final Cut before, right?
And it's just
but I do that with
audio.
the systems. Yeah, I'm doing that with the system settings. When I'm just saying, because I can select this, I can have audio go over this, but it's the system setting.
You're right. Yeah, Final Cut doesn't have that capability.
What about Loopback, Brad? That audio routing software that Rogue Amoeba makes. That you can take any audio source and patch it anywhere else, make virtual mics and all kind of things. That could probably do it for you.
Well, and
I'll write that down.
we picked up Apogee Apollo X6 so that we could do surround sound mixing someday at the office. But it's got a mixer built into it, so whenever you're doing your audio, you can if you're sending your audio out through your system settings, then you can actually set up virtual sources and that sort of thing. And that's how we ended up separating out signals, so that if you were working with like a timeline that was already surround sound, how do you mix it out to stereo? Or if you're working in stereo, how do you go vice versa? Or how do you just get one channel to do X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, so the problem with the way Final Cut, just without using any third-party stuff in the system is right now, is it hasn't been a huge issue for me, but if you think about it, if you're monitoring on your speakers and you're going system settings out, then it's like every notification, a little video that plays in the background or whatever goes out of your monitoring situation. It'd be nice if that was just on like the computer and not. And Resolve, of course, like I said, has that solution. GarageBand, actually, consumer app GarageBand will let you control your inputs and outputs separate from the system. So I don't think it's a question of is that too professional. You know, if GarageBand has it, it's
sure.
Yeah.
So the other thing I bought the A10 for, because I'm interested in playing around with kind of remote edit sessions and see how well that works. I'm sure there'll still be some lags and issues, but better than nothing. The other stuff that I'm looking at is obviously presentations. It's nice to be able to switch back and forth, and maybe finally feeding some YouTube content to my Off the Tracks channel, where I've been playing a lot in Keynote, and there's a ton you can do in Keynote in terms of animation, and you can add audio clips, and so I could pre-record stuff, and then between that and this mixer, I can basically record live out a presentation, and then just cut out the parts where I mess up, rather than laying everything in Final Cut and having to do a lot of editing. It's like, well, let's just do the kind of Keynote thing. I hit the talking points, play the video clips, and then it's done. So
yeah, no, I think the A10 Mini Pro is perfect for that. And it probably solves your audio chain problem too. It's got 2 external audio inputs.
It's got audio inputs. The other thing I can do is, so I have this USB mic, and I was like, well, how do I get that through the ATEM? And right now it's not. It's separate. There's probably a frame rate difference happening right now. But what I found is, that's why I was playing with GarageBand, is I can select this as an input on GarageBand and then set just the BM. It reads it as BMD HDMI, but I can set that as an out point. I can turn that channel on through the software. I have full control over the mixing, and also GarageBand allows me to control like EQ, compressor, all that stuff. So I could record that presentation. In Final Cut, I might go back and just do a clap at the beginning of the recording and make sure if it's a few frames off that it's back in sync.
Sure.
And then through the USB-C, you can record on like one of these little drives. So, and it records, it's pretty compressed H.264. Yeah. Or the other solution is the Sumo, but I found a problem with the Sumo. When I share presentations or even AV out from Final Cut over HDMI, for some reason the monitor freaks out. And I don't understand that completely, because the ATEM is supposed to conform all the signals to the same refresh rate.
The Sumo, which is acting as your multi-view.
Yeah, so
hosted by your ATEM Mini Pro.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't even have to go through the ATEM. It's through the ATEM or not. But when I do a keynote live and I hit the play button, it's fine when it's just on the screen. When I go into presentation mode, it starts freaking out. And when I go to Final Cut and go AV out over HDMI, it freaks out. Over SDI, it's totally fine through this device. Sorry, that's a lot of glitchy, nerdy stuff, but that's the stuff I was experimenting with yesterday, trying to figure out this whole workflow.
Well, that's an interesting point you bring up. I wonder, people have said, I think Alex Gollner and myself have said, where is Soundtrack Pro 10? What about just using GarageBand?
For what?
With Final Cut. With Final Cut for going back and forth. If Logic's too much for what you want, what about using GarageBand back and forth? Does GarageBand, do they spit out an XML of any sort?
I don't think so.
No.
You can take a GarageBand project and take it into Logic.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think there's any XML export in GarageBand. And I think Soundtrack Pro, really, that was just because it was so integrated in the studio, and it was a post audio tool, right? Like Logic and GarageBand both aren't really intended for post audio mixing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Final Cut Pro 10 is so much better at handling audio than Final Cut Pro Classic was. That the only things that I would have gone to Soundtrack Pro for, I'm now going to Isotope RX7 because it's significantly better than Soundtrack Pro ever was anyway at those sorts of things.
I mean, Soundtrack Pro was great for a lot of kind of audio mixing and audio editing, but like as you said, better than Final Cut 7. But now Final Cut 10, like I don't want to round trip that. Like it's much easier to just do it.
Well, I guess what I meant is for like things like plugins and bussing and a master fader or whatever. I mean, something more complex. Mm-hmm. I don't do my audio in Final Cut Pro 10. Anything complex.
If you were doing the very okay, so if you wanted to do like a really, really simple workflow and say you really wanted to mix in GarageBand for whatever reason, then your best option is to output audio stems as separate files and bring them into GarageBand, and then you could layer it with music and effects and whatever else you wanted to do.
What I meant was a new version of GarageBand, a step up from where it is now. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, okay.
For people that don't want to go to Logic, that's all.
Sure. I still think doing the compound clip mastering inside of Final Cut is still a step that I do on every single video that I do, right? And I split things out into either sub rolls or rolls, and I can apply effects to the entire clip, or I can affect just a single roll or just a single sub roll. And so those aren't like mixing and bussing aren't issues that I have with Final Cut Pro 10. Usually the issues that I run into, at least for simple edits. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with Jeff. If you need to do like something that's above, like, I don't know. I feel like all of the plugins that are available in Final Cut, you've got compressors, you've got EQs, you've got reverbs.
Right.
I've been able to do plenty of sound design and mixing inside of Final Cut Pro 10 without having to go out to a separate audio application. And we did entire sound mixes for screeners of a feature film that played in a theater in Final Cut Pro 10.
Sure.
So
but most films go to Pro Tools, though.
Yeah, and that's fair. And when it's time to do something bigger than why not Logic or Pro Tools, I don't know. I personally don't see a need for like a Soundtrack Pro replacement. But that's, I think the best thing is, instead of a new GarageBand or whatever, is just, okay, let's make roles-based mixing inside of Final Cut easier.
That would be fine. That would be, I expect that. Audio needs work in Final Cut Pro 10 for sure.
10.5. Which is coming out tomorrow.
Well, speaking of 10.5, without anybody that knows anything, who thinks it's coming out in 2020?
I hope it is, because if it doesn't, it's really scary.
Well, it's already 29 months old. 10.4 is 29 months old, so.
I hope it is. I don't know anything. I have no idea.
Right.
I mean, we've had some
other than
some decent incremental
our
updates.
friends at Apple installed jobs.
What'd you say, Pat?
Oh, yeah.
I was saying we've had some decent incremental updates that haven't been full point based. And the point system is really just a way of marketing, hey, this is this big of a release.
Right. But that's also in control of Apple. They control what they call Final Cut Pro. They control whether they call it. 10.4.4 was a big update, but that was still 18 months ago.
Yeah,
we're
and then
10.4.6
came with some decent stuff as well, right?
We're going to go to 10.4.9.9 before we get to
we have a little teeny bit. We could have a little 10.4.9 is a possibility, but at this point, why even bother? Come on.
Yeah,
it's 29 months old. 10.4 is 29 months old. So let's get 10. We know 10.4 is being worked on, for God's sake. It's got to come out in 2020.
Yeah. Well,
I still lean on the side of stability.
But
there are other applications that are famous for their lack of stability and constant updates being pushed out. And I want a viable product that I can use, that's a workhorse, that if I'm in a time crunch, because I do a lot of time sensitive edits, and I don't want to be nose to the grindstone and then have stability issues. But there's some updated feature, up new thing that I can do that I'm not doing under the gun. Like I want something reliable, and if the next release has new updates, great. Just don't compromise the reliability, because that's the backbone.
Well, nobody expects that. Nobody expects less reliable. I don't.
Well, yeah. Well,
I don't.
Not in the Final Cut community.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I do not expect them to do an update that's less reliable than the version before. And if the couple of times they had an issue, they had an update out within 30 days.
Right.
So that's not an issue. The reliability, of course, number one. But
I'm just saying that affects the development cycle.
But 29 months. What have they been doing for 29 months?
There may be a fantastic new feature that is causing stability problems, and they're working that out before they release it en masse.
Well, take it out and just release what they got. Take whatever's causing the problems out, unplug it.
I'm not sure you can have it both ways.
That's why you don't have a scrolling timeline and you don't have a role-space mixer, Richard.
I've been told by multiple people who know Final Cut Pro on the inside, they've had a scrolling timeline since version 1.
Careful, you don't want to be blocked by by Phil Schiller.
Well, I'm not saying who it is, but they've
17%.
They've had a scrolling timeline.
You got to
since
stop
version
repeating
1.
that story, man.
Brad, you know that Richard's already been blocked by Phil Schiller.
Well, I don't say anything bad,
I'm poking fun.
On the Apple website they have Final Cut Pro Radio listed. and they also have FCPX.TV listed as resources for Final Cut Pro.
You mean they had until today?
Well, today it might be off. But the Final Cut Pro description said tips, tricks, and commentary.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing is commentary. I'm not a negative person. By and large, I'm pretty positive.
It's fair. To Jeff's point, I can't, on my 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro, I can't get Premiere Pro to launch more than once after reboot.
Really?
So, yeah, it comes up with some video driver error compatibility message. I've dug into it as much as I can. I cannot figure out. I just have to restart my whole computer and then I can open it up. And sometimes it will have metal acceleration and sometimes it is only software only. It's painful.
You said it in the preferences, but it doesn't remember that setting about your.
It will gray them out. It'll gray out the metal acceleration option. Yeah. Like it doesn't read my graphics card.
Something that's interesting, we talk about features, functionality, and stability. The last update that came out in Final Cut Pro 10 that came out right before the Creative Summit, we were all pretty upset by the fact that they made us sign NDAs and then didn't tell us anything new, right? That was pretty upsetting, I think, to pretty much everybody who was there.
I didn't know that, Patrick. That's a surprise for me. Go on. Go on.
That everyone was upset.
I have no memory.
Keep going.
I have no memory of signing any NDA.
We are all going to get banned by Phil Schiller if we keep this up. Every one of us.
Phil Schiller.
Not Jeffrey. Jeffrey's been okay so far.
Oh, well, okay. Right. Whatever. So we'll put it this way. There was no major update that came out after the Creative Summit. And everyone was like, what the hell? There's usually a major update that comes out around the time of the Creative Summit. We'll put it that way. How is that?
Okay, make sure you're in your audio podcast. You edit that other stuff
will.
out. Okay.
I'll take it right out.
Oh, boy.
No,
anyway,
go ahead.
But at the same time, that release, in the release notes, they talked about the amount of performance improvements that, like, they didn't say it this way, but the way that as someone who's worked for developers for years now, the things that they said were, we did changes so that it would be compatible with the Mac Pro and with Metal. So what that actually looks like is largely like a rewrite of a majority of the code within the application. So while it may be 29 months since we've seen something that has been called a 10.4 or a 10.5 or a 10.6 or a 10. It's a 10.4 point whatever, the amount of rewriting that has happened to the application is much larger than that. But it's not very marketable. And sometimes you do things that aren't very marketable for the same performance and stability. So,
but do you think the entire team was working on Metal too? Don't they have
engineers?
Don't they have a Metal? Yeah, but doesn't Apple have a Metal 2 team that does everything? Does Metal across all the other apps?
Here's the thing: is when you're writing code, that means that the code for each and every function within the application has to be rewritten with the new libraries in mind. So it's every team has to be on board. The team that's writing the timeline has to rewrite the timeline using Metal code. The team that's rewriting the viewer has to do the same thing. And then there are other things that have to do with how it works with the Afterburner card and how it works with HDR on the Pro Display XDR. And all of that stuff has to be written by each of these different teams. So there are teams that are broken into these little functionalities within Final Cut Pro that had to completely rewrite large blocks of code to be able to create the version that we got last fall. So you would think, maybe there's just a team that does all the Metal, but
really, at least most of it.
It's like, hey, now instead of English, we're all speaking German. Well, isn't there a team that can just make everybody else speak German? Well, no, you have to legitimately teach everybody the German that's necessary to get their function done. So if I don't know how to order food in German, then I can't order food because now we're all ordering food in German. And if I don't know how to communicate with a contractor who's building a house in German, then I can't communicate with the contractor who's building the house in German. My entire life can start to fall apart if I'm not able to communicate to these different teams. So if I am Final Cut, I need all of these different teams to be able to speak the new language, to be able to function correctly for those performance and stability enhancements. So, that's just,
that
well,
makes sense.
To kind of paint a picture, Richard, for as I see it, you've got engineering, you've got designers, you've got quality assurance, and you've got the marketing people. The engineering and the quality assurance had to have been tied up for at least a year on all of that. Hopefully, the designers, I would assume, didn't have as much to do during that period, and they were coming up with some really great ideas that now maybe the engineers and the quality assurance are able to test that might go into 10.5. So that's why I'm hoping that 10.5 is a really feature, rich update. To Jeff's point, I hope they also are doing a lot of testing to make sure it's the reliable, stable Final Cut that we
absolutely
come to love. And I think the whole idea of rewriting to metal is to breathe extra life into the. If you think about it, they actually delayed, because what was it? OpenCL accelerated, like all the plugins and everything were OpenCL for years, and even after Apple said Metal and then Metal 2, then they finally, it was only when the Mac Pro was on the horizon that they said, okay, we have to
rewrite everything that's going to a GPU. Everything that's going to a GPU has to be rewritten. So that's a major chunk of the application,
Well, I understand that. And whenever I talk about Final Cut Pro 10.5, new features, whatever, number one is stability. Number two is performance. Right off the bat.
Sure.
But they should always be primary. Then, on top of that, because how many people do you think is on a Final Cut Pro core team? Not Luke and those people we know, but the core team. Brad, when we met at the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, we went into the theater and they said, turn around, you can see the Final Cut Pro team. And they had a lot of the people lined up in the back of the theater.
Yeah, I mentioned that's not everyone, but
but I mean, that was dozens. That was certainly dozens.
I believe there are about 200 engineers who work on not just Final Cut, but the other video apps.
Okay. That's a lot.
So there's 200 engineers that touch some part of Final Cut at some time, but there's also iMovie and Clips and AB Foundation, and there's probably a lot of convergence between different departments there as well.
Yeah, probably.
Absolutely. So do you guys have any tips for anybody for Final Cut Pro? One of the things that I've been using a lot recently is people might not use as much is blade speed, Shift B.
Yeah.
I love that.
I also
I was just watching a LumaTouch demo, and this guy was showing off how he blades and speeds up and blades, and I was like, I love the Shift blade, because you're not breaking the clip apart.
Right, exactly.
And you can move those edit points really easily. So
and it has a speed transition across the edit point.
That whole
Clever.
section functionality is awesome because everything you just said, you can adjust the transition. If you're applying separate effects like a grade, you don't have to apply it across 3 different cut points or whatever. And the thing I didn't know about that I just learned was when you initially do the Shift B, you can go back and adjust what frame that hits on.
By double clicking and doing change edit point, right?
Yeah. I did not know about the double click change edit point. Every time I've had to I want to move that around, it was cumbersome to do, and so that's huge. That's great.
What was that tip Nick gave at the Creative Summit? There's a modifier key you can hold. I think, is it Option you can hold while you're scrubbing over an effect in the effects browser, and it will change the intensity.
The intensity.
Yes.
Was it Option or Command?
I don't remember, but that was a pretty cool trick.
Just start pressing buttons.
Just start pressing modifiers.
Exactly.
If it's not one, it's the other, or the other one, or the other one, or the combination of the other one, or the combination of this other, whatever. Just start pressing buttons.
Yeah. Just start pressing buttons. It's either Option, Shift, Command, Control, or Command, Option, Shift. or Control. It's one of those.
Or
a
some combination of all of them.
Yeah.
We had a question this week in one of our groups from Chuck Braverman. He was consolidating. He was making a new project, and he wanted to know. He was pulling media from a bunch of different libraries, and he wanted to know the most efficient way to do that. And I told him, well, you can either do it inside of Final Cut Pro, but every time you pull a clip from one library to the other, you're going to get a pop-up warning.
Yeah.
Or you can do it in the Finder. Pull the media from the libraries in the Finder, and then check that one preference that says use keywords for folders, and then make a new library with that Finder organized media. And you don't get that pop-up warning every time you move a clip.
When you say move media in the Finder, though, are you talking about externally managed media? Because I wouldn't really want to be digging into libraries and moving clips and trying to.
And I wouldn't go into the external media folder either. But if it's
also linked, yeah, I guess. Yeah,
Kino's got that ability to like pull metadata from a library, and ingest it into the clips that are inside of Kino, which are all of the clips that are on a drive. So that might be an interesting way to pull the metadata from all of the libraries and then pull the clips in, or.
Usually what I do, I mean, this is just simple, old-fashioned, but because I've been having to do this, 'cause, like I said, I've been writing a bunch of ideas for YouTube videos. I've been starting to pull clips from old interviews, and I've just basically created a new library on a separate drive, and I'm just bringing in the clips I need and just copying them straight over. I mean, if it's consolidating a bunch of libraries, that's one thing, but in my case, I'm repurposing old clips, and they have keyword tags and favorites and stuff, and so I'm just doing it, maybe consolidating things to an event and bringing that over.
See, but I don't use the Finder, and that's the thing. I use Pathfinder, and all the Final Cut Pro libraries have a disclosure triangle on them, so it's very easy just to turn the disclosure triangle down and pull media out. And I don't mean move media. I mean copy
paste.
Copy media to a new library, to a bulk library, organize it in the Finder with folders, if you wanted, to describe day 1, day 2, and then just make a new library pointing to that media externally.
Yeah, I get nervous about the idea of even if you can use Pathfinder to find that sort of thing. I would not recommend that to people who aren't as adept at this sort of thing as you are, Richard, because there are going to be plenty of people who are going to try that and accidentally duplicate media into the library or accidentally delete something. Or
sure. Well, then would you tell them to do it inside of Final Cut then?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the safest way, is creating that external media folder and then using consolidation tools. Right. I mean, if you move the clips inside of Final Cut from one library to another, it might say you're copying from one library to another, but okay, you click the button and then you consolidate the media to the location that you want that new library to use.
Well, that's the beauty of hard links too. If you are on the same hard drive and you create a new library and you're in Final Cut moving stuff around and you consolidate, it'll happen instantly. It's a hard link. And
if you're on NFS.
Well, or a direct attached storage.
Oh, does direct attached storage do the same thing?
if you're on Apple formatted drive, not exFAT.
Oh, nice.
So that was. But
the huge advantage, I think, and Brad, you touched on that, was the work you've done in Final Cut. All the metadata tagging, all the ins and outs, all the anything, lots of when you're consolidating within the app, all that gets put into the new library. Versus if you're doing it in the Finder, it's just another external clip.
Yeah, and you lose all sorts of rich metadata. Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's talk about the Finder real quick. With Catalina, you have hard links as well, right?
Right.
They the way they demoed it was really funny, because they're like, look, it didn't take any time to copy, and I'm like, yeah, well,
it's a hard links. You're right.
Yeah, and they just brought what we had in Final Cut to other users, but I think in Catalina it has to be an APFS drive to do the hard linking. And then the other thing is, if you were to not want to lose your work, then you'd have to get something like Phil Hodgett's. The intelligent assistance is FinderCat.
FinderCat, yeah.
And then you'd put all your tags and everything on there. And then when you bring those clips back in, that metadata does get saved, which is really cool because it does save. I've tested it, saves ranges.
Yeah, you have to be careful though, because if you move from one drive store type, so like if you're moving from a network attached storage to a direct attached storage, and you're changing file system types, they handle extended attributes differently, and so you can actually wipe all of that information going from like APFS to exFAT or NFS.
Yeah,
to
and this is
SMB
in this
or to-
specific case, I would say stay on the same hard drive.
right.
And then you can use
Right.
that kind of hard link thing in a new folder. But again, easiest, dumbest, simple, foolproof kind of way is just do it in Final Cut.
Well, yeah, that's a good point about the metadata. But if you didn't have a lot of metadata and stuff, you weren't worried about that. I would probably still do it in the Finder. I would just copy though. I wouldn't be moving anything.
Yeah, well, and something that's nice. Something that's nice with PostLab is that you can open a read-only copy of a library and just pull things over if you're in Final Cut.
Okay.
So that's a nice way to make sure that you're not screwing up your library when you're moving clips from one library to another. Is just open a read-only copy of your library and then pull things over. I mean, that's
true too. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's what we've done. Anytime I was doing anything in PostLab, that's what we did.
So here's another item that I, based on this copying libraries, sometimes I find that people think the preference in Final Cut Pro that says leave files in place is the only one that means external media. But the other preference, copy to storage location, can also be external media. Both of them can be external media depending on your library inspector setting for where the media is being stored. But people have a tendency to think leave files in place is the external one. Both of them can be external.
It's kind of the three-way. Do you have three different ways? Are you leaving them in place and just doing a link, or are you setting your storage location to an external place and Final Cut's kind of still managing it? Which that you don't want to mess around with a ton in the Finder. You would just let Final Cut put it in the folders it does, or are you putting everything in the self-contained library? Which obviously you wouldn't want to do if you were collaborating on a shared storage device.
Right, exactly. So I'm going to name a couple of wish list items for Final Cut Pro 10.5. I would love to see a pop-up HUD. I mean, here's the thing. How many times? What happened there, Patrick?
Literally, my finger touched the desk. This mic picks up everything. So.
Well, if you're for example, I have this 34-inch screen, and I have the browser all the way at one end of the 34 inches, and I have the inspector all the way at the other end of the 34 inches, and constantly I'm touching something in the browser, going all the way over to the inspector, touching. I'd like to see the ability either to right-click or shortcut in the browser and pull up a short list inspector for the most common things that I want to do to something. Same as the timeline.
A customizable HUD, a HUD that you can just make anything you want.
Or the whatever would be the inspector, the most common thing in the inspector.
Floating inspector, essentially. Okay. Which Motion has a HUD.
It does.
Same as a timeline. Going from the timeline, I'm touching something in the timeline, going up into the inspector. Timeline up to the inspector, constantly back and forth, back and forth. If I could just right-click on it in place, and a little floating HUD comes up, or give me some shortcut items, just at least the most popular ones. I don't need the full inspector, but the most popular ones that I might be using.
That's what it's like in Motion. I mean, the HUD is not necessarily every single functionality. Oftentimes it's a lot, but you still got to go to the inspector to get everything.
Yeah.
Right. But
so do you want that experience, or do you want to be able to move the inspector wherever you want within the...
Well, that would be fine too. Definitely organization.
I like some sort of HUD idea.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I like the idea of a kind of a sidecar HUD.
Right. There you go. Yeah. So that would be even great on the iPad or something. Another one would be I'd like to see is an overview of the timeline, no matter what you're doing. No matter what you're zoomed into,
like on the
under
touch
the
bar.
viewer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the touch bar.
Yeah, that's I love that.
Yeah.
Well,
I do too.
LumaTouch, I thought they did a brilliant job of putting it right below the viewer.
Yep.
I don't like the cut page in Resolve where they put it in the center and it's fixed, and then you have a fixed zoom in view. I hate that. But the way
I just don't like the
LumaTouch
cut page in Resolve anyway.
That's
You don't?
because you're not 24 and it's hard for you to learn new things. No, I'm just kidding. I have some problems with the cut page myself.
You're probably right. You're probably right.
It's
I'm
probably
20
a little of both.
I'm not 24, and I'm not going to learn a new hardware device to be able to navigate a page of Resolve to be able
$1,000 keyboard.
the
so you
keyboard
can
with the
use
little
a jog
spinny
shuttle.
thing. Yeah, so I can have a jog shuttle.
I'm gonna get a $1,000 keyboard, and I'm gonna put the Mac Pro wheels on it, and it's gonna be awesome.
You're going to put the Mac Pro wheels on it, but
do you
you're
think that?
actually going to elevate it using the Pro Display XDR stand, right?
Yes, of course.
Adjustable height for
Right.
the
I can roll it and adjust it and shuttle all on my desktop.
That keyboard is
Super
heavy
pro.
as heck. I mean,
Well,
it
that's
weighs
why
a
you
ton.
need the Pro Display,
Sure.
pneumatic lift.
And wheels. And then you can put it anywhere,
I
but they
know.
don't lock. Nothing locks.
Jeff.
Oh,
You're full
no,
of it.
why would you want it to lock?
Again, that's why you need to get the little wheel wedges specifically designed for the Mac Pro. 3D print those suckers and
Yeah,
keep.
I remove
them
all locks. I take off caps lock. I mean, I
I
remove
just-
the key.
I just thought
You
of
actually
a,
remove the key.
That's how flexible I am.
I was just thinking about a Luxo Jr. style short film with that setup, and maybe it's trying to kill itself or something. What am I?
Something out of Sid's workshop from Toy Story, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, What were we talking about? Oh, I was going to say, speaking of the timeline overview, Chris Hawking would point out that if you have command posts, then you can pull that up. So,
Right.
but I like the way it's implemented.
Where does he put it in command post? Where is it located?
I think it's just
Just
a floating
the-
window.
Yeah, it's like the developer version of the touch bar, so it should just be able to
You mean
float.
just for the MacBook Pro, not for like my? I couldn't have it.
No, you could. It's a developer tool that's used.
Oh, the touch bar would come on my screen.
Yeah, if you've got Xcode installed,
I see.
You can generate the simulated touch bar for any application. So my guess is that he's just taking that and placing it
I
in
see.
the Final Cut interface, which could be done on a Mac Pro if you wanted.
Yeah.
There are so many things I wish would come to like
Well,
on
let's
the
talk
Mac
about 'em.
on the MacBook Pro. I love Touch ID and like just being able to use my
yeah, absolutely.
authenticate.
On
And
a
I've got
keyboard.
this keyboard to go because I've got my laptop elevated. So I'm using this all the time, but it doesn't have. So I'm awkwardly reaching up and like, and so I'm
Yep.
gonna press the button.
Yeah.
And I also miss having I know you can get them with the number pad, but the one that came with doesn't have the number pad.
Oh.
Yeah, you and your. I just the number pad is so.
You've got the Mac
Look
Pro
how
one that's
long
more
this
silver,
is.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the iMac Pro and the Mac Pro come with that fancy number pad, and I just miss the number pad because anytime I'm
I
like
do
doing
too.
two-factor authentication, I just want to always use the number pad.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going back to when I used a 10-key calculator back in 4th and 5th grade. I'm not 24 anymore, so I'm not used to using the numbers on the top of the keyboard to do all my mathematical entries.
I use the numeric keypad for doing time code entry all the time. I have zero to enter me in the time code field above the timeline. So I single tap 0 on the numeric keypad, and it goes into that. I have a shortcut, so it goes into that mode. Then I just type
What if
the
your
numbers.
time code has 0 in it?
Well,
what happens?
zero first, and then I'm into the field. Then I can type whatever I want.
But if you type that same 0, what happens?
It
Just reading 0.
Yeah, because I do that all the time. Because I'm already
already
in the
there.
field. I'm already getting ready to go. 0 gets me into that field. 0 gets me there. Since I'm already at the keyboard, I don't want to, whatever the keyboard shortcut is it Command P, Option P or something? I don't remember.
Control P.
Control P. I just hit 0 and I'm there. Then I type the number and I can
Something
use
that most men are not capable of is the keyboard shortcut.
keyboard shortcut. I use them all the time.
Hey guys, sorry, I got another thing coming up, so I gotta jump out of here. But
No, Jeff, no.
Nice
Are you
to
gonna
see you.
make
Sorry,
money?
Jeff.
Are you going to make some money for us?
yeah, we're trying to, try and Money, money, money.
Money, money, money.
Anyway, it was great seeing you guys. Great catching up.
Yeah. Great to see you,
Absolutely.
Glad we could reconnect in the middle of all
Absolutely.
this.
I'm glad you could join us.
Have an offline call so that we don't get ourselves Apple banned. Anyway.
Yes, yeah. Well, and I'm gonna call up Patrick and hear all about all the Ben Mankiewicz stories. And next time I'm in LA, Patrick, I want to go out for drinks with Ben. That would be.
I never actually met Ben.
What?
Just
No.
it was a second. Yeah, I'll text you about it. It was a second job on top of a job I was working at Riot Games, so I wasn't in the edit bay until like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So,
Jeff, do you have anything you want to plug before you go?
That's the story.
Oh, do I have anything I want to plug?
Yeah, before you go.
No, I should, but stay safe, stay healthy.
Okay.
Wear a mask.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Jeff. I really appreciate it. Talk to you later.
That's it.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks.
See you,
Have
Jeff.
fun. More later.
Bye, Jeff.
He's still on.
Still there.
Oh,
there
he goes. There he goes.
Yeah.
All right, now it's the three of them.
Yeah.
Now we can
I
talk
should
about
probably
secrets.
also-
We can talk about secrets. We're going to end this shortly anyway.
All right. Well, guys, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I do have a number of things that I need to get done, so I should probably hop off as well. But guys, it was
I gotta put a
great
kid
hanging
down
out
for a
there.
nap. Yep. Sorry, I was saying I have to go put a baby down for a nap. So, a 18-month-old. So, yeah.
Before you go, I want to check the updates for Final Cut Pro. Nothing there. I don't see any updates. I check it every once in a while. I mean, if it comes
Are you
10,
announcing
4, 9,
winners live? Do we need to do that?
the what?
Are you announcing LumaFusion winners
Yeah,
live?
So let me go. There's a couple, some of those ridiculous things people were saying. Let's do that. So Bill Sola says, I'll do your laundry. That's pretty good, right?
It sounds like a good deal.
Let me see. But there's a couple other ones I liked as well. Oh, I think Nuno, I thought this was a live performance by an 80s band, then I turned on the volume. That's pretty darn good too, don't you think?
I like it.
Patrick?
You pick, Richard. I just know if you have to. How many winners are we picking? And
Well, I just have one. I think that's
I'm
a
sorry,
pretty good
Richard.
one.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
me as well. You're kind of
Really?
Yeah. breaking up.
clear. Yeah, I'm assuming your streaming feed is fine, but
I concur with whatever your opinion is, Richard.
The 80s, I think the 80s band comment is probably the funniest one. Do you hear me?
All right.
Don't you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
80s band is pretty funny, yeah.
Or
I
the
mean,
laundry.
I mean, someone is offering to actually help you. Now, who was the person that said "me, please"? Was that the same person that said the thing about the laundry, or is that someone else?
That was Christopher said me. That was a single comment. Christopher Ashworth said me. Peter Mann said me from Cape Town, and Nuno. I can't quite read his name.
I mean, if someone is offering to do your laundry even though they can't do it, that seems like somebody actually really wants it.
So it's a tie between, I think, the live performance by an 80s band and the laundry. That was Bill Sola, T-S-O-L-A. Is that how you say his name? T-S-O-L-A. Not that I need my laundry done. I've always done my own laundry all my life, so.
So are we picking a winner, just one?
Yes, that's all I have. Probably could get another one if I needed to.
Let's see. I don't have any coins on me to flip. We could do the entire. Oh, I've got a guitar pick.
There you go.
Got a silver dollar.
Oh,
I
okay,
also
so
have a
this-
guitar pick.
This is heads. This is tails.
right.
We'll do the band on heads
80s
and
band.
the
Laundry.
laundry on tails. How's that?
Okay, that sounds good.
All right.
Is this going to work?
And it is my friend's
Laundry.
tails. So it is laundry.
Okay, so let me see who that is.
That's as scientific as I think.
That's fine. That's completely fine. Let me see who that was. Bill Sola, Tsola, Sola. That is how you say that.
All right. Congratulations,
Bill.
Bill.
Bill, you.
Do
But
we get-
you have to do the laundry first, I think, right? Right? I don't
Instead
want
just
no
being
cheating
shipped in
going
a
on
big
here.
box.
Yeah, exactly. So
Make
Bill,
sure
now
you got
Bill,
gloves and a mask. And
you have to have an iPad that'll run LumaFusion, and if you do, you win a copy of LumaFusion. I will give you I'll message you on Facebook. And Torgrim Grimstad, you guys remember him from the summit from Norway?
yeah.
He says, me. It's too late. Sorry. All right, gentlemen. Do you guys think there's going to be a Creative Summit this year?
Probably not. It's in the state of California, and the governor and the mayors have a
You think,
tendency toward thinking that large group gatherings aren't going to happen until 2021.
Well, what about if we all had to go to Apple campus and get tested first to see if we had any kind of a virus? Then negative test means you could go ahead to the summit.
You know, the other piece of this is that FMC is starting to do virtual conferences. So there is a chance that we could do a virtualized version of the Creative
That's
Summit.
what I was going to say.
So
Yeah.
that might happen, but there's probably not going to be an on-campus experience this year, I don't think.
Yeah.
Which
I
actually
like
might
seeing
make
you
it
guys,
easier
though.
for people who would want to come from. Well, I mean, we can find another way to get together once I can actually go outside of my house for anything other than groceries.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we're relaxing a little bit in Maryland. A little bit. Bit. There's steps that they're going to, I think Ocean City, for example, I think they're going to do a trial. These are mostly outdoor things. Ocean City obviously is outdoors. I think they're going to do a trial and see. I'm not sure how they're going to do that. I mean, how the trial would be measured, but.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that we all have a chance to get to see each other in the next year and a half.
Absolutely. No, I think so.
It's been fun catching up with you guys on this, though.
It has.
Richard and I
Absolutely.
talked last week, but it's been a while since I've talked to Patrick. So and Jeff,
Good to see you, Brad.
you as
And
well.
Patrick,
Good.
you can come back anytime and with Frame.io announcements anytime you want, or somebody else.
Yeah. Maybe we can even come on and do like a review of 3.6 at some point. That'd be fun.
That would be fantastic. You're more than welcome. And I do have another Final Cut Pro Radio live tomorrow morning, and I'll give you a hint. Well, I'll tell you what it is. It'll be 7 a.m., which means what? East Coast time. That means
Launch of
Australia.
It's got to
25.
be over.
It's going to be an Australian.
Oh, an Australian.
Oh my goodness.
Sean Landers coming on and talking about selling his new project.
Nice.
So he'll be on tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.
Very
about
cool.
that?
That's
Very
awesome,
cool.
Richard.
Yep. And you can
We'll
watch
have a
it
good time
after
with
the
Sean
fact.
tomorrow. Tell him that we said hello.
I won't
Absolutely.
be waking up at 5 to see
I
that.
understand.
And
I
Patrick
understand.
We'll be up till
Nope.
4.
Nope, I won't be doing that either.
Very good.
It'll be 4 a.m. your time.
Yeah, not doing that.
Very good.
Okay.
All right. Y'all have a
Thanks.
good rest of your day. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for stopping
May,
by,
may the
everyone.
Sith be with you. Revenge of the Sith. Happy Cinco de Cuatro.
There you
Maya.
go.
That was yesterday.
That yes. Mm-hmm.
Cinco de Mayo is today.
Happy Cinco de Mayo. All right,
Talk to
bye,
you guys
everybody.
later. Bye.